Okay, so hi, welcome everybody to today's presentation. Just a couple of housekeeping items as we begin. If you could just keep yourselves on mute, then you can ask any questions that you have. You could take yourself off mute, or you could use the text chat and I could watch those and let Karin know any questions that are in there. So I just wanted to welcome our guest speaker today, and I'm just going to do a little introduction and then I'll hand it over to you, Karin.
Sounds good.
Okay. Oops, sorry. 1 second here. Okay, so Karin Davis is a leading expert in organizational strategy and the visionary chief creativity strategist behind Pigs Fly. Armed with the knowledge that investing in creativity can lead up to 20 times ROI, she partners with senior leaders to help them infuse creativity into their organizational strategy. Reaching thousands across multiple international venues, her speaking engagements have inspired executive directors, CEOs, and social impact leaders at the most prestigious events. With her extensive background and passion for unleashing creative potential, she can help your organization soar to new heights. Beyond traditional training and more than consulting, Karin helps take your organization to the next level by shifting mindsets and culture to develop lasting organizational change throughout creativity and innovation. So really excited about this, Karin. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you if I'm going to share my screen now.
For sure.
Hopefully I have that going. I'm going to make sure I'm with my... Now I need to make sure the audio is also shared, and I can never remember where that is.
I think if you go under where the microphone is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and then click that, or do you do it on there? Sorry.
Well, we'll see when we get there. It might be on already.
Oh, okay.
Okay, here we go. It's so much more elegant to be able to start a presentation in person than it is online.
No problem.
Okay, so let me know if you see my flying pig. It should be taken off soon.
Yep.
You're seeing it? Okay, good. All right, so we are going to be talking about creativity today. I am incredibly passionate about this subject, so you'll have to excuse me if I get overly excited at some point. But so we are going to jump right in. I want to know how many of you remember going to this place on a Friday or a Saturday night and trying to, figure out which is the latest, greatest movie to pick up. I know I did it all the time, and of course that's part of my great memories of I guess it would have been the late well, no, I guess the 80s, early 90s. What about this? How many of you remember struggling with the film, trying to get those little tiny holes to match up with the little tiny teeth and trying to get them to pull every time you try to twist that thing? Man, that was pain, wasn't it? Anybody have one of these? So here we have, I had one of these. I thought it was just the coolest thing. And I remember like the sound it would make when it would tap, it would be like tap, 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 tap. And just that alone made me feel organized. I don't know if I was really organized or not, but that was a fun one too. And here, of course, we have the infamous BlackBerry. I actually did not have one of these, but I remember my sister and some friends who were pretty devastated when they could no longer be using their BlackBerry. So that was definitely a time of mourning for them. Now this, I don't know if any of you had one of these back in the day, but this was something that I got for Christmas. I think it would have been about 1984, maybe. I remember my dad bringing it in, and he was like super excited about this. And he's like, "This is the future. You need to learn how to use these things." I'm like, "What am I going to use the computer for? I'm never going to be a computer programmer. Like, why will I need a computer?" But my dad was insistent, so we spent all Christmas Day trying to set this thing up, and I'm sure it wasn't as hard as it seemed at the time, but we um we didn't have a monitor, so it had to be hooked up to the television. And we didn't even have the drive on the right there that you can see. We had a cassette tape that we can see at the little back there. And the programs had to load on a cassette tape, and it would take, I don't know, like an hour to get a program to load. It was insane. But when we finally got this thing together on Christmas Day, we were like, "Oh, okay, we did it. Now we get to do something pretty exciting." So we got the manual going, and we opened it up, and we started working through it. And eventually this is what we managed to do, you know, something pretty exciting like this. I think we were putting our names in it. So computers obviously have come a long way, but man, straight to the what the song was, I really did love my 64. So that was pretty exciting. Now, what is really interesting is that in back in the day, Commodore 64 was incredibly popular and incredibly successful in the marketplace. So, all-time sales with 30 million units between 82 and 93, like crazy huge. Palm Pilot, of course, was credited with popularizing the PDA, and it sold over 1 million units between 96 and 98. 2 years, 1 million units. BlackBerry, of course, we know how popular BlackBerry was, but it owned over 50% of the US and 20% of the global smartphone marketplace. 50 million devices in 2011 in 1 year. What's crazy though is that it lost 3/4 of its market share in only 5 years. So it just boom, it just tanked. Kodak, really interesting. 95% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in 1976. Huge domination of the marketplace. Employed over 60,000 citizens of Rochester and 140,000 globally. And in 1975, this guy, which I can't remember his name now, which I need to remember to look up, but he actually was an engineer working at Kodak, and he actually designed a prototype for a digital camera, which is really crazy given how quickly and how much Kodak ended up falling, because they never actually designed a digital camera. So you can see, like, all of these different organized or companies, the main thing that happened with them was that they failed to innovate. Kodak failed to see to jump on the fact that they could actually produce a digital camera. So they didn't embrace technology. BlackBerry failed to innovate past what they had already succeeded. They got to a place of success, and they thought, hey, we can just kind of rest here and everything will be fine. Meanwhile, Apple continued to innovate and took over that market share. Same with some of the other companies. So again, this idea that if you do not continually innovate, you're going to fail. And it can be, even these huge, enormous companies that have a huge market share can fall into that trap. And in particular, in our age of right now, where we're dealing with what we call a VUCA environment or world. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but the VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So you can just think about the last few years that we've lived through and how much that is true in terms of how we're living in the world, and how much that is going to continue to play a part. We're dealing with change at such an incredible rate that we really don't know what the next few years are going to look like, let alone 10 years from now, particularly if you think of things like AI and the whole technological revolution. So, come on. Sorry, my slide's not going. There we go. So that, I mean, that's scary to deal with. But the good news is that there's some possibilities, and that's what I want to lean into is what are the possibilities for dealing with this VUCA world that we're living in, and how can we make sure that we survive? This is really interesting because 80% of senior leaders say that innovation is one of their top 3 priorities. So this is very good news. And we need to all lean into that regardless of the size of our organization. The bad news, though, is that only 20% of companies actually reach their innovation goals. So there's this huge disconnect between what we want to achieve and what we're actually able to achieve. So the question becomes, how do we become better innovators? What's the missing link? And I truly believe at creativity is what's missing, and that creativity is the foundation of innovation. And this goes not just to, what my opinion is, but this really goes into the research, into the science of creativity and the science of innovation. And what happens is I'm finding, companies and organizations often let's innovate. We want to be innovative, and we kind of jump into this whole concept of innovation without really fully understanding what it is and how to do it, and the concept that creativity is really at the foundation of innovation. And it's not just small organizations that do this, but it's large organizations. I was talking to someone from Johnson & Johnson the other day who said, oh man, yeah, we really need to be more creative. And you think, wow, like even a company that size isn't fully optimizing creativity. So it can be a powerful tool, creativity. So we're going to talk a little bit more about, what is creativity and what is innovation. And we'll try and clarify this, because one of the most important things is that everyone needs to be on the same page. And when you have people who have different definitions of what it is, it's really hard to achieve something because you're not all talking about the same thing. So, excuse me. So creativity is defined as a product or a service that is original and valuable. Okay, so we're going to let that sink in for a minute. Creativity is a product or a service that is original and valuable. Now, innovation, on the flip side, is the marketplace success of that creative product or service. Okay, so once more, we're going to go back, just back a little bit. No, I'm not. Yes. So creativity, product or service that is original and valuable. Innovation is the marketplace success of that product or service. Okay, so here is an example, and I find this example really helps people like really fully grasp this concept. So this is a really cool Zamboni, a miniature Zamboni machine that was made to be put on the back of a four-wheeler and be used for people with farms and big country properties who want to create an ice rink. And it was designed, it was created, and it was tested in the marketplace, and people can actually purchase it, put it in and put it into use. So that is innovation. Now this is creativity. So here you've got a little kid with a tricycle. He's got a bucket of water, hot water, and some towels that are coming out the back of it it's doing the same thing. It's putting hot water on ice, but this is creativity. So this is creativity because it's something that's made at home. It was, you know, it's successful, it's original, it's of value, but this hasn't been put into the marketplace. So this is creativity. So I always say that you can have creativity without innovation, but you cannot have innovation without creativity. Now, what we see in the market, in the corporate sector right now, is that 75% of people, these are employees, do not believe that they are living up to their creative potential. 75% feel like they're not able to live up to their potential. But on the other side of that, only 20% of CEOs believe that their employees have the creative skills required to innovate. This just drives me crazy because there's this huge gap, this huge potential of people who want to be more creative and the senior leaders who actually don't even believe that their people have those creative skills. So what could, imagine if those 75% of people felt like they were living up to their creative potential. Imagine what could happen. There's so much power that could happen if CEOs were able to take advantage of that. So creativity is also not just good for innovation, but also good for other business practices. So the research shows that creativity helps to increase efficiencies and productivity. Creativity can help with employee engagement. Creativity can also help with improved well-being and mental health for employees. So really, creativity is how you hire and you retain top talent. And if organizations were to optimize creativity for these things, it would have so much power in multiple different areas of an organization. So we know now what innovation is, we know what creativity is, we know we need to be more creative, but how do you become a creative organization? That's sort of where it boils down to now. And what I find is that out in the business world, people will be like, okay, yeah, we need to be more creative and great. And then that's kind of it. Like nobody really knows what to do to actually be more creative. So what it boils down to is that you really need to look at how to deliberately and strategically weave creativity into the DNA of your organization. And this is what I do with Pink Pigs Fly. This is my ultimate objective when I work with organizations. It's not a one-time workshop. It's not a 2-day retreat. It's not something that's just given to one department or one area in an organization. It has to be something that is throughout your organization, and it has to be something that is sustainable. So this is how I do that. This is the what I call the 7 pillars of creative organizations. And this is the framework that we work within. And we kind of look at it as kind of like a systems thinking perspective of creativity. So we look first at how do we develop creative individuals? How do we then support creative teams? How do we support leaders who can foster those teams and be part of an organization or a culture that is fostering creativity? And then we look at the habits or the routines that can sustain creativity over a period of time. So that's the 7 pillars that we work within. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about 2 in particular. I'm going to talk about the first one, which is creative mindset. And then we're going to look at what a creative culture and environment looks like and how that supports creativity in organizations as well. So the first one, creative mindset. This is our first pillar. And it really is foundational to this whole concept. And it has to be something that everyone in an organization works on. Everyone from the front line right up through to senior leaders and the top employees. So what is a creative mindset? Well, it includes a whole number of different characteristics, and a lot of them will overlap in different areas you'll notice. So a lot of them are not just part mindset, but they could be mindset as well as a skill. And they all connect to culture as well. And that's why we go back to that systems thinking, because they're all intertwined. But one is curiosity. So curiosity is, I think, one of the most important ones, because it is where we start to question things. And if we're not questioning things, we're never going to look for solutions. So questioning things is something kids do oh so naturally, and we did it probably as children as well. I know I did. I drove my family crazy with, well, why is this and why is that and how does this work? And my father was incredibly patient with me, which I can look back now and really appreciate how he did instill that curiosity in me, because he took the time to work through my questions and answer them. And then if he didn't know, we would try to look them up together. Of course, we would be looking them up in, Encyclopedia Britannica, not online, but we would look for answers. And he really helped me continue to be curious. And this is a quote, of course, from Albert Einstein: "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." So this becomes part of how can we sort of get out of our the busyness of our world that we live in, and take things a little bit slower to question and to say, well, why are we doing this? Like, is it because we've always done it? Is there a particular reason? Or how might we do this in a different way that would have a more positive impact? So this is a little exercise I want you guys to do. So come off mute for this one. And this is an exercise I do where I simply get you guys to ask questions. Be curious. Be curious, get it? What questions do you have about this image? Go, ask the
Sorry, you cut
questions.
off on my end on the last part. What questions do I have about what, sorry?
This image that you're looking at, what questions, if you really start to think about it, what questions would
So
you?
where's the queen bee? Where, like, what kind of honey are they making? What kind of bees are they?
Yeah,
Where is this located?
yeah.
That's all I can come up with.
Keep going, keep pushing. Anybody else?
Do you ask what kind of bees? Are there different kind of bees?
Sure.
Do they sting? What time of year is it?
Are they wild? Are they farmed?
Mm-hmm.
What time of day is it?
Yeah. Why are bees yellow and black? Why are they striped like that?
And why are the cones different colors?
Yeah.
Like the holes.
Yeah. How do they
Why
get
are
that shape so perfectly?
Yeah.
I've always wondered how bees know what their job is.
There
There's
you
different
go.
jobs for different bees.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much going on. There's so much buzz.
Yeah.
Mechanics going around. How do they know who's doing what?
Yeah, like did they get a job description or something? Like how do they know what to do? Okay, so this is just an example of some, I call these creativity bursts, and these are just some little exercises that we do to just kind of wake up our creativity and different components of creativity that we don't normally do. Usually we would walk by a beehive and go, oh my God, don't sting me. But sometimes we just need to take that time to just be curious in all aspects of our life, because when we're curious in our personal lives, we might think of something that affects our professional lives as well. So there's lots of crossover, but that's just a quick little exercise. So the second one is imagination. As kids, we are incredibly prone to using our imaginations and creating worlds and things that don't exist, and we can really make believe in a great way. As adults, we tend to lose that ability. So this is another area we work on. And when I'm in person, I give everybody a bunch of pipe cleaners, and I say, okay, you've got 30 seconds to make an animal out of these pipe cleaners. And what that prompts is, first they have to use their imagination to be able to think of, okay, well, what is it that I'm going to create? And then they have to imagine how they might be able to put that together using only pipe cleaners. So again, that's a very simple way of activating imagination. And why imagination is so critical is that before we can actually be creative in terms of creating something or producing something, either a service or a product, you have to be able to imagine it in your mind. Nothing that gets created is not imagined first, right? So you have to be able to look into your mind and see what the possibilities could be. So the more you practice being imaginative, the more creative you're going to be able to be in terms of actually producing things. This is another one that is super important in terms of what we talk about in creative mindset, being playful, using humor and having fun. They all connect to a part of us as children where we were more creative. And, the research shows that creativity it's just easier to be creative when we have this kind of a mindset. Now, here's another one for you to ponder on. This is another creativity burst. When I'm doing this in person, I give people toothpicks and ask them to lay them in front of them on the table so that it looks like 100. And then your task, your challenge is to move only two of these toothpicks so that it spells the word cat, C-A-T. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to ponder this and see if you think you know the answer, let me know. Any ideas? Okay, I'm going to give you a clue. I'm going to show you which two toothpicks can be moved.
Oh, that's not what I was thinking.
All right, I'm going to now slowly show you the answer.
Ah,
Ah,
there it is.
there you go. So that is something, this is where it relates to perspective. So a perspective is something that is part of developing a creative mindset because we always tend to look at things in our sort of standard perspective, the way we always look at things. And we need to be able to change our perspective and look at things differently in order to come with new ideas and new solutions. So this is just sort of an example of the power of taking things from a different perspective and how that supports creativity. So the next one is learning and growth. This is, we hear about the importance of a growth mindset. This is very much connected to creativity because we're always looking for new ways to do things. So the more you learn and the more you grow personally and professionally, the more connections you can make between things. And so that sort of supports that always coming up with new things that may appear differently when you start to look at them. And this is, of course, connected to so you can see how all of these can be connected, right? So you have to also be comfortable with ambiguity and complexity and systems. And it's okay to be in that muddly, uncomfortable area where you're really not sure what the right answer is. And being able to kind of sit with it and feel like, oh, this is so ambiguous. I don't like this. I need an answer, but it's okay to sit there and wait for something to unfold. Okay. So that complexity is, dealing with that complexity, it can be very difficult, but very powerful when you're dealing with creativity. Of course, looking at things in new ways. So being open to novelty. A lot of people have difficulty with change. And, if I come into an organization and say, okay, we're going to try something new, a lot of people will be like, nope, I don't want to. I'm not, this is the way I've always done it. This is the way I'm going to keep doing it. I don't want to deal with change. It's scary. So that's, being open to this novelty is a key component of, being able to achieve creativity. Next one is around confidence and risk and failure. You know, we see kids who are willing to try anything, they fail, they get back up, they do it again. As adults, we get into this space where we're like, well, first of all, we don't even want to try it because what if we fail? And if we do try something and fail, it's like, okay, that's it, we're done. Like, I'm not going to fall again. That was too painful. So finding a way to, you know, be confident about what you're attempting to do and knowing that taking that risk is important to doing things differently. And that failure is not a time to stop, but a time to reevaluate and say, okay, that part didn't work, but I learned this, and how might we use that learning to try again and take another risk? So individuals and organizations who are not willing to embrace risk and failure are never going to optimize creativity. Connections. So this one is really powerful as well. This one is about connecting things that it's almost like from two completely different areas. You would never imagine them being connected in any way. But when you put them together, they can create something new and really inspiring. And that's why sort of this connects to the learning and growth, because if we're learning only from one industry and one sort of funnel, there's fewer connections to be made. But when you start learning from a multiple of different industries and you look at things from different perspectives and different areas, those connections can be made in new ways. And that's where new things come to life. And this is an example of that. So this is, there's a video on YouTube, and this is someone in the medical field who was walking along a road on rainy day and was all these slugs around, and suddenly was inspired by what he saw to create this surgical glue that would replace stitches or staples. And it was inspired by the crappy, icky, gooey stuff coming out of the slugs, right? So who would think that a slug could be connected to the medical industry into something that could become a surgical glue? But that's the kind of connections that creative minds make to come up with something new. This is another example of a doctor in Toronto at St. Mike's Hospital who made a connection between the black box on a plane and the operating room in which he worked. And he thought, you know, black boxes exist in airplanes so that everything can be recorded. And, you know, when something goes wrong, they can be evaluated and listened to and, you know, figure out what failed and they can learn from it. Why couldn't we do something like that in an OR where it's tracking all of the data on the equipment and the recording of the conversations and you know, come up with the same thing where we can learn when something goes wrong. And so he created this OR black box. But again, so you've got this connection between, you know, a surgeon in a medical institute and an airplane, you know, so who would think there would be a connection there, but there was. So that's sort of a very quick summary of mindset. We're going to flip now over to creative culture and environment and talk a little bit about some of the components that make up this area. And you'll see that there's connections between some of the individual mindset components and how they relate at an organizational level. So the first one we're going to talk about is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. One of the most important things in an organization for creativity is diversity of thought. We need to have people who have different experiences, different ideas, different backgrounds, coming together to bring those things that are different and create something new again. So like that concept of things that would never connect and coming together to make something new and valuable. When we have, you know, if we have a boardroom of all older white men, we are not going to see those creative ideas come to fruition because they don't have that diversity of thought. And that's part of the struggle that, you know, we all know we have been dealing with for many years now. Now it's changing and it's getting much better, but there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of not just bringing people together who are diverse, but actually allowing them to have that space to share their experiences and to have that diversity of thought so that it can be used to be creative and then innovation. Learning and reflection, such an important one. An organization, if they fail, let's say, and they just say, oh, that didn't work, we're never going to do that again, are missing this opportunity to learn and reflect and see what might be done in a different way, and could be so close to something incredibly creative that could lead to, an innovation that could change the world. But if they're not practicing that reflection, they're going to miss that opportunity. And this is, an example of this would be Blockbuster. So back in the day, Blockbuster was at its height in terms of the service that it provided. And then Netflix came along, and these two guys who created Netflix went, we think that we have something really unique. And they went to Blockbuster and said, we think you should purchase us. Like you should buy us out, because this is what we're doing, and this is the future that we see, and this is going to be the next big thing. And you have such a great, share of the marketplace. If you took this on, you'd be unstoppable. And Blockbuster at its time went, no, we're good, thanks. We're fine, we're doing things fine. They were not doing a lot of this creative work, obviously. They were not thinking and reflecting and looking to the future, learning from what was happening around them. And they missed an opportunity to purchase Netflix. And we know what happened to Blockbuster, and we know now what's happening to Netflix. So again, this taking the time and space to reflect, so critical. It's one of the most important things that I stress CEOs to do, is to actually journal. And it can be a powerful tool. Creative integration, multidisciplinary perspectives. Oh, sorry, dog's barking, my dog barking. This is an important one, because what happens in our world, in our business world, is that we get very stuck in working in silos. So we have one department or one region or one area, and they work very much in their area, and they stay there, and they don't cross into another silo. And again, this is an example of missing out on opportunities to make connections between things that you wouldn't otherwise connect. That is how new ideas come to fruition. So taking things from a different perspective in terms of crossing silos, so critically important in how we look at creativity. Here, this is another one where we connect right back to, we talked about this in mindset, humor, play, and fun. When we have an environment in an organization that supports this, we have people who are open to being more creative. And this is sort of that foundational piece of culture that needs to exist. It doesn't mean that you need to have, games and activities all the time, but it just means having this sense of that work is, even though it might be serious what we're doing, we can do it with a sense of play and fun, where we're enjoying ourselves and we're laughing. I remember way back when I was working at an organization, we were working with individuals with eating disorders, so it was very, very serious. But I had an intern who was working with us. She's like, oh, you guys are always laughing. I'm like, yeah, well, we are enjoying the workspace. We are enjoying the work that we're doing together. But don't mistake that for the fact that we're doing serious work and that we're working hard. So, there's that balance there. Okay, this is a video that I want to show you, and I'm hoping the volume will work. If it doesn't work, it really doesn't matter, because you're still going to see what happened. It's not narrated or anything. So I just think that that is just such a brilliant example of adding fun to something, you know, very mundane as walking upstairs, how the power of that, like how what kind of change you can have amongst people. I love that. So here's an example. There's a couple of just quick cartoons about, you know, what not to do. Unfortunately, these are things that actually do happen. And this is really against the best practices of developing creativity in organizations. And here's another one. One of the things that I do when I first start working with an organization is actually do an assessment to see what individual employees believe about their ability to be creative in an organization, and what senior leaders believe they're allowing or being open to. And unfortunately, there's usually this gap between those two things. Senior leaders are like, yeah, of course we're open to creativity. But when it comes to the employees, they'll be like, yeah, well, I had an idea, but it just got tossed away because, you know, people didn't think it was any value to it. What happens then is that people are less likely to continue to offer new ideas. So what the work I do is actually in eliminating that gap. So that's powerful. Here is another one around culture, being open to risk. Celebrating and learning from failure. We've already talked about the power of that from an individual perspective, but here it's just at an organizational level. One of the things we don't often see, we know how successful companies like Apple are, but we don't actually see how many failures they've had. And you know, this is just a quick infographic about some of their biggest failures. There was an Apple Lisa, Macintosh Portable, a Macintosh TV. There was a digital camera, 94, that failed. You know, there was something called Pippin, was a video game console, a Puck mouse, and then they had an iPod hi-fi stereo speaker. I mean, this is, when you look at all of these failures, these were major failures. But if you compare that to their successes, it's nothing. Like they have succeeded in so many other areas, and so at such a high level, because they took these failures and they learned from them. So, you know, I love this quote, without measures in place to actively celebrate risk-taking and failure, innovation will always be crushed. So another component of allowing for creativity within an organization is time. People will say to me all the time, it's like, we just don't have time to be creative. We don't allow ourselves time. We don't feel like the organization allows for that time. And, you know, if you don't have time and you're always busy, working without taking that time to, again, going back to like learning and reflecting and thinking differently, then that creativity is never going to be optimized and you're never going to achieve that innovation. Physical space is another huge one that is part of the culture that can really affect the culture. So I'm going to show you a few slides and see how this resonates with you. So when we're little, either in daycare or in kindergarten, you know, we are usually, you know, when we were growing up or even now, you've got these spaces that are so incredible, right? Like I'm going to highlight a few of these things. There's color, there's windows with natural light, there's furniture that moves, it has flexibility to it. And you know, there's just a visual stimulation in the room. Then children move from this and then they go into, you know, eventually they'll end up in classrooms like this in high school. You can see obviously the difference, and you can imagine how creativity would not terribly be, you're not stimulated to be creative in an environment like this. And then we have workplaces that are still, you know, it's changed a lot obviously now with COVID, but still will very much look like, you know, sort of this drab environment where we're sort of just given this tiny little space to work. And, you know, again, not spaces that are open or fostering creativity for sure. Now, here's a couple of examples of spaces. This is Google Space. What they have in their space is, again, you can see the light, you can see the color. They've got furniture that is movable and flexible, so you can have, here it's really important because you can have little intimate areas to have discussions with people. And there's also spaces where individuals can go to be by themselves to think. And as an introvert, that's something that I am very, very, I really emphasize, because having spaces where everyone is together all the time can be very difficult for introverts. So we need our little spaces to retreat to and get away from the world. And if any of you are introverts, you know what I mean for sure. This is an example of Adobe's workspace. So again, you'll see something similar, the natural light, the chairs that are flexible and movable, all really, you know, again, conducive to being able to think in a creative way. I'm going to show you this video. Just, can someone let me know, did you hear the volume on the last one?
No,
No,
the
you
did
stairs
not hear the
one,
volume.
no.
Okay. I'm not going to take the time to actually put the volume, figure out how to put the volume on right now, but I'm just going to explain to you that this next video shows you the space that Google has created. It's called the Google Workspace, or Garage, I think it's called. And some of the elements that they have in their workspace is some of the things we've talked about: flexibility of stuff, being able to move things around, test things, be in groups. And it shows you that it doesn't have to be at the level of, you know, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You can create these spaces on small on small budgets as well. So what I'll do is I'll send you the slides, and I'll send you the links to both of those videos. In this one, again, they were simply talking about, you know, an area that can be playful and non-competitive, and you know, flexible to be able to move things and test things out. And that's some of the narration that was missing from that. But I will send you the links to those so you can see them. So again, going back to this, you know, the framework that we use, we've just talked about the mindset was the first one we talked about. And I could have spent a whole day just on mindset. So these are just sort of tapping into just sort of an overview of what these different pillars are, and how some of the things that can be developed to or to create more creative organizations. And then we talked about culture and environment. Again, just touching on some of those elements. Quickly, I just want to explain to you the other pillars, just so you have an idea of what those other ones include. So under skills, this is where we would talk about things like divergent thinking and convergent thinking. We use those skills when we're ideating. And convergent thinking is actually something that's missed often in brainstorming sessions. And that's why there's a lot of talk about, oh, brainstorming doesn't work. Well, when they're saying that, it's because it's not being done properly. You use both divergent thinking and convergent thinking when we do ideation. And even further, when we take those skills and put them into processes, which is the third pillar, we use a process called creative problem solving. And we have 4 stages in that process. And it includes clarifying, so really looking at what is the problem that you're looking to solve. We spend a lot of time on that, probably more than ideation, because there's really no point in solving the wrong problem. And that's what happens quite often is people will jump into ideation before really clarifying what it is that we're trying to solve and why. And the second one is ideation. The third one is developing an idea. And the fourth one is around how to implement that idea. But within each of those, we are using both divergent, which is big picture thinking, and then convergent thinking, which is how to make decisions on what idea or what to focus on next. So that's another huge area is processes. Then we look at teams. And we look at how do we take those skills, the mindset, the skills, the processes, and put them into a group. So how do we work together to be more creative? What's important in terms of supporting individuals to be creative, and what are the best practices around eliciting creativity out of a group of people? When we look at leaders, we look at how do we help an individual first walk the talk, because if they're not being in that creative space themselves, then they're not going to optimize teams to be creative. So we look at how to, to be a person who can foster and facilitate creativity within a group of people. Then the last one is habits. And once you have all of these things on the go, how do you keep them alive? So rather than, once a year at an annual retreat, how do we actually put this into practice so that it's something that we're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And that's where it really comes into the fact that we're weaving it into our DNA, and it's just becoming who we are as an organization. And that's sort of an overview of the whole system in terms of how we work with organizations. So I want you to just imagine for a moment your organization or another organization or a company that you think might be struggling. Imagine the power that they could optimize if they were to look at all of these different elements of creativity, and just imagine how much different they could operate. You think of someone like Blockbuster. I mean, if they had had these components in place, they would have seen the potential, and they would have been able to optimize digital transformation even before Netflix brought it to them. That should have been something that they were on the cutting edge of. They had the people, they had the money, they had the opportunity. They just didn't have these components of being a creative organization to take advantage of that. So with that being said, we have a few minutes for questions and answers. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to chat.
I have a
For
question,
sure.
Karin.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say, everybody could take themselves off mute and go ahead and ask.
I'm on it. Ready to go. Thank you so much, Karin. This is a really insightful presentation that you provided with us today. As a solopreneur, I'm wondering if you might be able to give us any insights as to how we might be able to navigate creativity. I mean, we kind of live in a world where we're so easily influenced by what other people are doing creatively and what they're innovating. But when you're on your own in your own business, and for those who may not have these creative abilities or the confidence in expressing those creative abilities, do you have any tips or suggestions for all of us who are kind of in it on our own? And how do we navigate that process of being creative and innovative?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the definitely focusing on the elements of mindset. That's one area where it's like all about you, right? So you can really focus on looking at how you approach some of these things. Like, are you taking time to imagine what the future might be. To one thing I wrote about recently on LinkedIn was when we don't give ourselves goals that we call, like I call them stretch goals, or goals that are like almost impossible to reach. If we're not setting those types of goals for ourselves, we're not giving ourselves the need to be creative, right? We're kind of just operating on this is what we're doing on a daily basis, and this is going to slowly get us where we're going. When we set incredibly high goals, that means we have to be creative about how we're going to achieve those goals. We can't work the same way, right? We have to work differently. And that is what starts to get us, sort of makes that switch in your brain to like, okay, I can't keep doing this. What possibilities might exist for me to be able to get there? So that's one example. I also think that solopreneurs need to be with other people in groups where there's places to have that opportunity to be creative in groups, whether it's a co-working center or an online group. But there needs to be space to support one another in being creative. And it can be similar to the things that I would do with an organization, but just having them for individual solopreneurs. One of the things I toyed with a while ago was setting up the opportunity for small groups to come together of solopreneurs and be part of like a creativity group where they could come and say, okay, I need ideas around this. And everybody does a creative problem solving process, but focused on that one person. And then the next time there would be a different person. But again, sort of, and learning the process, learning, how to really optimize your own creativity, and then supporting one another in a group. I haven't done that yet, but that is something that has been, yeah.
I would very much be interested in participating on either end of that spectrum. I think that's an amazing idea. It's so hard, right? When you're trying to stand out on your own and to find your own path, and especially, I see this a lot with coaches, right? What makes you different from everybody else, and how can you stand out amongst everybody and still stay true to yourself and have that element of creativity?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, coaches are amazing, but if they don't have the expertise in how to foster and facilitate that creativity within an individual, you're not going to get that from them there, right? So yeah, you got my brain going in different directions now.
Yeah, I know. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? John, I just wanted to say this was great. Like, I love this presentation. It was really, sometimes I wish I had like, a few or like 2 ounces of creativity in my brain, but it's something to work on. Yeah,
you just need time to be creative, Lori.
Right. But this is really good. I really enjoyed this, and it was a nice different. It was different, and I liked it. Yeah. So I'd welcome you back to have you present again on something, and we will connect. And so thank you so much for presenting today, and thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate
we can
everyone here.
Delve into any of the the other areas more specifically, or go in deep into a couple of areas. There's lots of opportunities for.
Maybe you could do your first group session as a para webinar.
Maybe I could. That's a good opportunity too. Yeah,
for sure. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Yeah,
my pleasure.
And thank you, Karin. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Have
Thanks,
a good day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.